first time I came across your video, 5 major reasons religion is the number one cause of poverty in Africa.
It is strange because it comes from a clergyman. Thank God for technology. Thank God for the internet. It has allowed never before accessible information to become public domain.
Religion is the opium of the masses.
Non-believers all believe in something. It is the idea that Jesus preached. He actually never preached Christianity.
Well, nobody has ever wanted what's good for Africa except for Africa itself.
I like that, Renato.
Okay, 3, 2, 1, and you're live. The first time I came across your video, 5 major reasons religion is the number one cause of poverty in Africa, and given the fact that you're a reverend, that really stuck me. Religion and poverty in Africa. It's not a topic that most people tend to agree or tend to want to have a conversation about that, right? But it's a topic that you speak about explicitly. You have been writing about it, you have been doing research about it, and you have been reading about it. What inspired you to take that direction?
That's a very good question. First and foremost, I must admit it is strange because it comes from a clergyman. But then I am, right off the bat, I have to say this, I am a kingdom advocate. And for those who may not be familiar with that, with what that is, it is the idea that Jesus preached. Now, a man called Yehoshua HaMashiach, the anointed one, Jesus the anointed one, that's just the Hebrew of it, is a man that came on the earth and preached the kingdom of God. That was what he preached. He actually never preached Christianity. Christianity was a label that was given to the followers of the way. That's why it was called the way. And they decided to be called Christians in Antioch. And the original label was obviously meant in a derogatory way, but it was also to indicate those that were followers of the way. And so Christ taught the way, and a lot, and of course, life being life and things being things, that was lost in time. We lost that direction, Renatus. Christendom started off by being opposed terribly by the Roman Empire during the time of the Caesars. And then around the 4th century AD, the Caesar, Constantine, got saved. And so when he became saved, he then institutionalized Christianity. It became an institution. He merged state and religion, and they became one powerful tool. And at that stage, Christianity really gained ground in terms of the religion and the tool that was used to propagate that new message of the kingdom of God. But obviously, because man came into the picture, it turned from a real live relationship between men and their creator to an institution that sustained a class of people. It became a way for servitude and control. And unfortunately, all the crusades, all the discoveries and the trips and every other aspect that we know today, right down to colonialism, was driven and packaged within the concept of Christianity. Now, that's also true of Islam. That's why I say religion, because for me, it's the whole religious idea. Religion is man creating rules, rituals, and means by which they can connect with the divine. True spirituality, for which the kingdom of God advocates, is when the power of the divine comes into man and begins a process of transforming man from the inside out. So, as a born-again, spirit-filled, charismatic, evangelical, tongue-speaking, Pentecostal Christian, I really have to throw those all in. This idea of religion for me is nauseating, because we've seen, Renatus, you're not a genius. You can go around Africa right now and see what religion has done to this continent. And it's not just here in Africa. We can cross over into Europe and go into their history And we again will see what religion has done to that region as well. So it is something that is almost the polar opposite of what true faith is. And again, when I use the word spirituality, I need to be very crystal clear here. I am not advocating for a Gnostic kind of teaching, because Gnosticism, which maybe we will not have time to go into, but for those who know, they know. Gnosticism is the idea of man seeking a path back to God using methods other than established religion. So it's almost a self-journey that man takes. And the idea is to seek to connect to the spirituality of themselves and find the God within themselves, which they believe is a spark of the universal transcendent God, you know, a form of pantheism. And so that transcendent God is expressed in individual sparks called human beings. This is what Gnosticism is. I am not an advocate of that. I do not subscribe to it. I do not hold to it. And so when I use the term spirituality here, I am very categorical. It is spirituality from what Christ taught, what Hamashiach taught. That's what it is. So yes, it definitely opposes, Renatus, it will oppose powerfully established religion, because that's not what Christian religion or Islamic religion wants, because these two work on a totally different angle. So yeah.
And what do you define by religion and by spirituality?
Okay, so very simply put, Renatus, religion is man working his way to God. So there's a transformation from the outside in. Spirituality and true transformation, as taught by the kingdom of God, is God who reached out to man, and therefore the transformation is inside out. You see that? There is a transformation internally first, and then an outward manifestation of that internal change. But religion has always been an outward manifestation or play that hopefully these people who advocated hope will come and change the inside. But the Bible is very clear. The heart of man is desperately wicked and depraved. That's what the Bible says. Man has no capacity to be good. He has an idea, but under the right or wrong circumstances, even the most reverent man will manifest aspects of evil that are unreal. And so we of ourselves have no capacity to ever be wholly good. There is aspects of us that are depraved. And so we need an outside. We need this God presence, which is through Jesus Christ, to bring that internal transformation, which in turn then works inside out, and you see the true fruit out there. That's what it is, Renatus.
Does that mean human beings are inherently evil? Like they have an inherently evil side to them?
Yes, for me, based on my understanding, based on what I've learned, Renatus, based on my walk in the faith, yes. I know there's a number of teachers out there who teach that men are inherently good, they're 99% good, and just this 1%. But no. Because all you need to do is look at God's standard as dictated in his word, and then look at man. I tell you, no wonder God himself said in his word that the righteousness of a man are but filthy rags before God. There's no human that can ever meet that godly standard, the one that he demands in his law. It's impossible. No human can match that standard. Nobody.
I mean, and at this point in time, you can refer to works of individuals such as Karl, right, who was trying to explore the human's dark side, right, believing that humans are both good and bad. Have you been following the story? And so, do you believe now that religion or spirituality, as it may be, is the path for individuals to deal with their evil side that you believe we all have?
The challenge is that spirituality tends to be jacketed in religion. That's where the problem is, Renatus. But the truth of the matter is, for me personally, I will say spirituality and religion can't go together, because religion has always been about playing to the gallery. A lot of religious people, Renatus, I'll tell you, do stuff to be seen by others. And again, religion, especially its institutions, are designed to sustain or maintain the status quo. Let me tell you something. In my book, this one, The 5 Major Reasons Africa is Poor, I actually talk about this. I mention that from time immemorial, when man began to roam the earth, whatever time you want to use that, and then began to gather in communities, they very quickly discovered that the most powerful way to maintain an elite and servient group of people is to use religion, because the elite were seen to be noble. They were seen to be blue bloods. They were seen to carry the God element in them. And the best way to make that possible was to use religion. So what you notice is that religion became a very powerful tool to endorse a political position, whether it's a political position in the form of politics as we know it today, or in the form of politics in the past, which was regal. In other words, it used the concept of a kingdom. The king was anointed. To be anointed means to be consecrated into office, set apart. Now, that anointing or consecration was endorsed by a priest. So whether it's African traditional religion, whether it's South American, whether it's European, whether it's Middle East, or even Far East, there was always a spiritual authority who endorsed, who said, I am speaking on behalf of the gods as a prophet, as a seer, as a hearer of God's voice. And I'm telling all of you that God has appointed this man or this woman to be your ruler, and they will rule on behalf of God. So everything you do must be for this person because they represent God. Essentially, Renatus, that's what religion has done. And so every power that has existed throughout antiquity has used religion as an endorsement for their state. And it is still so even today. So even today, a lot of places when political leaders are taking office, what do? They will have a consecration. I mean, recently everybody watched King Charles being coronated. The last time a coronation took place was in 1962, I believe, when Queen Elizabeth was being coronated after the death of her father. So you realize that the church in that country, the church played a role in making that so. And now even the coronation of King Charles, the church played a role. So you find that the king is considered the head of the church, the Anglican church or the English church, although it has a lot of issues. So this idea of religion being used to endorse political office is powerful, Renatus. And so the smart people realized early that the best way to sustain any form of subjugation of people is through religion. No wonder Karl Marx, I don't agree with everything he taught, but I agree with this statement that, what did he say? He said, religion is the opium of the masses. It is the one that pacifies. Opium is a drug. What does it do? Pacify people. It keeps them cool. Napoleon Hill took that statement further and said, sorry, not Napoleon Hill, Napoleon Bonaparte, Napoleon, the French conqueror. He said, just as well, and I'm paraphrasing because I can't remember his exact phrase, but it's a very interesting phrase. He said, thank God for religion, because if we did not have religion, the poor would murder the rich. In other words, tomorrow, Renatus, there would be a revolution. All the poor people would wake up and say, wait a minute, why are we poor? Why are we doing what we do? Then they'll realize it's because someone somewhere said that these are anointed people, these are God's people, and so you must serve them. All your existence is for them. And so that status quo is maintained on the power of religion. It's very sad. And if you study Jesus's words and his teaching, you will discover that Jesus was a revolutionary. He came to upset the religious cart of the day. And no wonder the religious establishment took him out, because he just was not flowing with what they wanted, because they realized that this guy is basically messing with their game, is messing with their plan. And so they had to get rid of him. So that's the position I take as well, Renatus. As a believer, I know for a fact that religion as it is today is institutional, and its purpose and reason for existence is to sustain the status quo.
And is this all because most people cannot challenge religion, or they cannot challenge what they're reading in the Bibles or in the Quran or whatever books, holy books it is that they're reading? Is that the case?
Yes.
And
Absolutely.
what?
Look, Renatus, I was going to say yes, because this is what they are taught. Remember, belief is a function of environment. Belief is the basis on which everything we do is founded. Remember, beliefs are unwritten rules. When are these unwritten rules programmed? In childhood. That's why every religious establishment, and I'm not against it, I'm just saying that's what it is, will make sure that they capture the children early, teach them. And I mean, right now you see there's a new idealism coming on the market. What are they doing? They're going after the children. Okay, we call them the alphabet mafia. They are going after the children. And what are they doing? They're teaching those children things relating to their move. Why? Because they know once you capture the children, you can establish belief. Now, belief is a function of environment. And so if the environment is Islam or the environment is Christian, what do? Teach all this stuff into the kids until they become indoctrinated. That's what schooling is. It's teaching people to think in a particular way. And so even when they become adults, because they have these unwritten rules in their belief system, it's very difficult even for themselves to challenge what they're seeing. If they come across information that is contrary to what they understand and believe, they have cognitive dissonance. They refuse to change because they are no longer comfortable with this information, which challenges what they believe. So this is the reality, Renatus. A lot of people hear and get these things, but they don't get it. For example, what I'm speaking about sounds strange because I'm speaking as a Christian, but it's true. Jesus preached the kingdom of God. John chapter 3 talks about unless one is born again, they will never see the kingdom of God. So the idea of being born again is real. But what is religion teaching? Religion is teaching do good, be good, attend church, venerate your elders. There's a whole bunch of teaching in there that has nothing to do with the core transformative process that God wants of our hearts. And so they become set in that. It's a mind set. It's like concrete. You are set. Now, once you are set in that way of thinking, it takes a total breaking of everything to reshape the thinking. That process is not easy, Renatus.
Religion is the opium of the masses. What do you think about non-believers?
Well, the truth of the matter is, non-believers all believe in something. That's the funny thing about humanity. We have the way we were created, because there are people who talk about atheists are supposed to be, what's that word? Evolutionist. There's no creator. Everything came about by chance. But simple logic throws that whole thinking right out the window. It's illogical. And the biggest barrier of that kind of logic is this one. It's called entropy. It looks like when God created, because I'm a creationist, when God created this universe, he locked into the universe this component called entropy. What is entropy? Entropy is the tendency for things within a given system to decay. So there's decay locked into every aspect of creation. Now, if there's decay, then it is absolutely illogical and ludicrous to see something go from an inferior to superior level without external input. That's impossible. Nothing like that happens in nature. Every system goes from order to disorder. That's what's called entropy. So this entropy is the biggest conundrum in evolution, the evolutionary theory. because there's nothing that can appear by itself without external interference. So if you want a rocket to go to the moon, it can't just happen. Somebody has to sit there, do all the calculations, and create the means by which that thing will be controlled and go to the moon. There is no way this wallet can just appear. I don't care how many billions of years it takes. This thing can't just appear. This is made. Somebody designed this and purposefully went through a process of making it be. So that idea of things just appearing from nowhere are ridiculous. So therefore, non-believers or atheists, if you like, for me are super denialists, because they deny the fact that they deny the existence of entropy. They deny the existence of creationism, which is so obviously embedded within every aspect of creation on this planet. So they are just denialists. And the reason they deny is very simple. I've always said it. There are two types. There's agnostics and there's atheists. Now, an agnostic is an individual who believes in the idea of a creator, but does not agree with the interpretations as given by religious groups. So they say, look, I know there's a creator somewhere, but I just don't buy into your Christianity, or I don't buy into your Islam, or I don't buy into Buddhism. I don't buy into any of this stuff because I think the creator is there, but I need to find a way to know who he is without the dogma of individual interpretation based on culture and location. An atheist is saying there's no God. And that's where the argument is. If you say there's no God, then all this stuff appeared from nowhere? They'll tell you yes. How? Through billions of years. Did you observe it? Well, evidence. And which evidence? According to which school? According to who? You see? So everything is dogma. So you actually realize that even in atheism and the so-called atheist agenda pushers, there are gatekeepers, just like in religion. That's why for me, I call atheism a religion as well, because atheists behave in every way like a typical religious dogma or cadre or person that choose zealot. They choose to ignore all the evidence and only focus on what they believe. So even for them, whether they believe or they do not believe, evidence suggests that there is a creator. It is impossible for everything to see around us to just happen by chance. Houses didn't just bring themselves. Phones, these gadgets we're using for our discussion didn't just appear from nowhere. Somebody sat, thought, and created them. In the same manner, all living things on the planet were designed and created by a master designer. And you can see the order of design. There's no way. The eye, I mean, let's not go far, Renatus, just the eye. Have you seen how complex the human eye is? You tell me that the eye just appeared like out of nowhere? And how about the genetic code that was used to decode the eye? You see, there is a very interesting conundrum in that space I like to throw at atheists and evolutionists, which is very difficult to answer. Within DNA, I mean, there's this, you see, if you have to build anything, you need instructions, right? Now, God, in his wisdom, locked all the instructions of who we are in this 6-meter strand folded in a tiny space called DNA. In that DNA is all the code to create any creature from where it was drawn. Now, for that code to be decoded, you need a recorder. You need something that decodes the code. In other words, the code is encrypted. Like, for example, we're looking at our screens right now. The truth of the matter is this interface through which you see my face is the decoder. But the real information is ones and zeros. Not so. It's just ones and zeros. That's why it's called digital, ones and zeros. But if you and I looked at the code, it doesn't make sense. So we need a decoder. God created a decoder in nature. It's called the RNA. Amazing. Now, RNA is like a decoder. It comes and it reads the DNA and says blue, black, straight hair, whatever. It gives all these characteristic traits that make you and me. Now, the real conundrum comes. Where does the RNA get the information to learn how to decode? From the DNA. But then how did it read the DNA to make itself if it didn't exist to be read in the first place? There you go, chicken and egg. So the truth of the matter is RNA is the reader of the DNA. If there's no RNA, the DNA can't be read. And the DNA can't be read unless there's an RNA. So that conundrum, throw to any evolutionarist, no one will answer because there isn't an answer. Unless you just go with our option, which is it was created. There was a first human being. There was a first couple. There was a first cow. There was a first goat. They contained the original DNA. And then from there, everything was replicated through procreation. So when new babies were born, they came with the new stuff and on it went. Not this, a cell, and then somehow it started making itself complicated. Ridiculous nonsense. It's just so ludicrous. The only reason it's even accepted is because all the leading scientists and gatekeepers are saying, this is the way. This is the one. And if you argue anything else, they debar you, they throw you out of academia, they refuse to endorse you, they refuse to license you. So they hold the gates, the keys to the gates. And that's why they propagate such a lie continuously, because they are the ones who license all the academicians. Simple as that, Renatus.
I mean, but don't you think that some of their concepts make sense? And I'll give you an example, right? It's like when you think of it, right? The theory of the created creator. I mean, the uncreated creator, right? Because if you look closely, all religions are based on faith, right? And faith is a belief in what cannot be proven, what cannot be seen, right? And so when you also speak about the theory of creation, at the end of the day, when they throw you a question such as, okay, God created everything, right? There had to be a supernatural power that, created humans and created everything, and everything was thought of. But then there's also a question of, then who created God, right? And I think for most religious individuals or spiritual individuals to be able to answer that question, you have to rely on faith, right? Because in as much as they can't prove who created us, who created everything in the universe, it's also as hard to prove, who created God and how God came into existence.
Absolutely, you're right, Renatus. And that the difference is that we don't refuse to acknowledge the aspect of faith. We admit that we need faith. There are things and aspects that cannot be explained by mere observation, but by faith. So we actually rely on us. Those of us who are of spirituality accept this. The difference with the scientists is they want empirical evidence. But even the scientists will admit that you do not get order out of chaos. That's not possible. It is impossible. We always go the other way. For example, there's been this argument all along that humanity is evolving. That's a myth. Actually, humanity is devolving. How do I know? I'll tell you how I know. We have more diseases. We have more sicknesses. We have more complications now than ever before. But then somebody will say, but how come humans live longer? They live longer because of technology. Simple. So humans have become reliant on technology, medicine, pharmaceuticals, and better quality of life. But in reality, my brother Renatus, you and I, our ancestors, if you just go back 5 generations, our ancestors were far healthier and far fitter and far better in every way as far as their bodies are concerned than we are today. So the only reason is because we have technology that is our prop. This lie is because of technology. That's why we can live longer, as they say. But the truth is that we are devolving. There is no demonstration in nature right now of something that is actually getting better. There is mutation, yes, and that mutation leads to change, but that change leads to deterioration. That's why we have more cancer today, we have more diabetes, more health problems, left, right, and center. All these things are because of the devolution of man, not evolution. But that's just one example among many.
Okay, that's an interesting concept. And I think at this point, I'm going to speak as someone who is, I'm going to speak as someone who has lots of opinions on this, but with no information, if that makes sense. So when you're speaking about devolution, right, and saying that humans are not actually evolving, but we're devolving, I think I'll disagree with you on that, right? Because if you point out to the fact that, you know, human beings are now weaker and we have more diseases than we had before, and, you know, we are not, maybe we don't have as much muscles and muscle mass as we used to have before. I mean, if you look at the change in environment, right, it explains a lot as to why right now, for example, we don't have much muscle mass, right? Because we are not hunters anymore, right? And so we don't go out in the forest and try and fight bears and kill them, and, you know, and you know, like, use fire to light them up and cook them and eat them. And speaking about things such as pharmaceuticals and you know, human beings being more vulnerable to diseases. I mean, you know, when you look at the food that most people are eating right now, I mean, it's junk food, right? So there's no way you'd expect such individuals to be healthier, right? Because that's the food that most individuals are consuming. I mean, however, at some, like, when you think of, you know, for example, the brain power, right? The evolution of the brain. I mean, I would say that human beings right now know more than what they used to know before,
Yeah,
right? I mean, it's like,
that's true.
even with just your phone, right? Like, you have access to billions of information, right? You can just read anything that you want right now. I mean, there's even a joke that a young man right now has more access to women than how King Solomon had, right? Just because of technology, because of access to information, to the phone, to social media. It's connecting millions and billions of people in the world, right? So in as much as, of course, human beings are now more vulnerable to diseases and sickness, but I mean, human beings are also smart enough to be able to create technology that can help us solve such problems, right?
You know,
I mean, like, right now we can
there's
take
your
someone to
there's your challenge now. If we have technology solving our problems, what does that mean for brain power tomorrow? It means we'll become more and more reliant on the technology. For example, our great grandfathers who were thinking up these early theories used far more of their brain and memorized far more than this new generation. So, in other words, this generation is becoming more passive because it's handing over its capacity to these technologies. So, technology is actually going to become our great undoing in as far as the use of the brain is concerned. And now, you know, thanks to Elon Musk and all these powerful people, they realize that AI is growing at a supersonic rate. Everybody's afraid about where AI is going and the implications of AI. So you know what they're doing? They came up with an option. They say, no, let's merge man and machine so that man is able to interface directly with computers, and that way they can keep up. Now that sounds very exciting, because then, oh wow, that means now I will no longer have to use my, okay, this is a dumb phone, so I won't even bring it in the picture. I won't be able to use my phone anymore and be slowed by the speed of interfacing between myself and the data. You know what I mean? 40 kilobytes per second, very, very slow bits of data in terms of transfer from the gadget to me. I can eliminate that, and now I can receive at the speed the gadget can receive data, which is, you know, megabytes per second. That's amazing. Now, if that happens, what essentially will occur is that we will now merge. The line between machine and man will blur. And this is where this will go. What will essentially happen is, in the end, there will be an indistinguishability. But the part that for people like me concerns me isn't even just the merging of man and machine and interfacing so powerfully so that we can access the internet at the thought of our minds, and we can get into the metaverse by a blink, and we can walk in what is called augmented reality and see two worlds at once with our eyes and enhance our eyes and hands. I mean, that all stuff is great. But here's the part that many don't think about. The same way that we will be able to access the internet with thought is the same way that the internet and whoever runs it will be able to access our thoughts and our hearts and minds at the spark of a button. And what is the possibility of that leading to? It's going to lead to a place where there can be serious downloading of what I call mind-altering behavior. And that could lead to the very, okay, this is an exaggeration, but I think it's not a far-fetched thought. If you're a fan of science fiction, there is a series called Star Trek. And in Star Trek, in that universe, there is a civilization called the Borg. The Borg are like cyborg humans. but they are completely machines and they have a hive mind. So what is a hive mind? When you are no longer thinking as an individual, but thinking collectively. And that is facilitated because they are all interfaced and connected to this AI. So it's pretty scary. I don't think that's evolution for me. I think that's devolution. I think it's a transition, and hence why it's called transhumanism. It's a transition from Homo habilis or human to Homo techno and Homo Homo techno. Let's stick with Homo techno. To Homo techno, because essentially man will transition to the next stage. They will transhumanize. So the humanity will be eliminated, and the machine will be eliminated, and a convergence of the two will occur. That is not evolution in my books. That's devolution. That's elimination of man as we know it.
I mean, but I think we can all agree on also the advantages that such technology has, right? For example, like curing neurological disorders, right? I mean, it's brilliant, it's amazing.
Yeah.
But I mean, of course, there's also the fear of, how far can this thing go, and how far can we control it before it gets out of our hand, right? But then, in as much as you can view it as devolution, but I mean, I think we can all agree that it also has a lot of advantages and it's also helping a lot of people. But I think the question comes, how far can we control this before it gets out of hand?
That's right.
Because at some point it probably will, right? And I think it's also something that individuals such as Albert Einstein thought of, right? When he said, I don't know what World War III will be fought on, but I know World War IV will be fought on stick and stones, right? And the question is, will we at some point need to turn off technology because it's taking control?
That's a very, very serious question. I mean, let's be honest. A lot of people are hailing the fourth industrial revolution. They're really singing about it. But one component a lot of people ignore about the fourth industrial revolution, I don't even think they ignore it. They just don't know. They're naive. They are dancing to the tune sung and harped on by the technologists and the World Economic Forum and all those organizations. But what people don't realize is that the fourth industrial revolution is vastly different from every other revolution. Think about this. Every other revolution required labor in the form of human beings, because human beings are the ones that made these machines work. So remember, they had assembly lines, they had all sorts of things, massive manufacturing, and you had that labor force in there doing the work. I mean, that's the reason why we even had the rural-urban migration in many parts of the world, because people were moving away from the agrarian reality to this industrial reality. And so that labor, the requirement of labor, has been a big deal throughout humanity. But the fourth industrial revolution is a digital revolution. And at the heart of that revolution is AI. And to be perfectly honest, all that we need now is AI to be merged with robots. And once that bit is understood and the profitability and sensibility is seen, there will be absolutely no need for humans to man many of these places. Right now, you already know, Renatus, there are factories that are manufacturing medicines and high-end tech with very few people in them. Like, you find a massive factory which 100 years ago would have had 10,000 workers running all those assembly lines. Today, the same factory can run on 20 people, 20 tops. Everything is robots, everything is AI, and it will produce the same job far, far more efficiently. This is true in so many areas of human endeavor. So now, even if one says, yeah, but they'll still need humans to manage technology, but you'll notice there'll be very specialized technologists. One person can manage a factory of 1,000 workers that in the past by themselves as a technologist, because the AI will be able to note mistakes and make corrections, and then the humans only supervise to ensure that everything is in order. So the fourth revolution doesn't need people. And that's the part that people don't realize. They're just hailing on, being happy, but so many jobs will no longer be necessary for humans anymore. And so this brings a conundrum. So what do you do with all those extra people? Two things. Either you put them on universal basic income, and sustain their lifestyle somehow, or B, you get rid of them. I'm not going to talk much of the getting rid of them because I'll be accused of being a conspiracy theorist. But the truth of the matter is that this is the reason why there's such a big song about resources, climate change. These are the new messages being harped around everywhere to make people feel a sense of urgency that there is actually too many humans on the planet and the resources are not enough. For me, I argue to death that is so not true. There's more than enough resources just in Africa alone to feed every person in Africa and have enough left over. The only reason why that doesn't happen is because we have a system whose aim is to separate two clear classes, the elitists and the rest. And these rest serve the elitists. That's how it is. And you have to sustain this and use all manner of methods, of which religion is one of them, to make sure that this status quo is maintained. But the truth of the matter is, if we took every resource available right now and distributed it, there is enough to feed everybody. Rananas, Africa hasn't even reached its potential in terms of population. And I know there are people coming here and saying, hey, the environment is being damaged. Yes, it is, if we have irresponsible governments who don't put in place environmental policies to protect the environment, yes. But the truth is, we have enough land, Renatus. We have enough land, even here in my country of Zambia, there's enough land for everyone. The food, we can self-sustain. It is possible. One president demonstrated it at one point in our African history, and that was Thomas Sankara. He demonstrated that we can feed ourselves. Money, there's no money. No, we have another president who demonstrated we can find all our money internally, and that was Magufuli. They demonstrated that we don't need these outsiders as Africans to sustain ourselves. At one point, one very ambitious man tried to get Africa to create its own currency with its own backings and feed and sustain itself and trade with itself. Well, he's not there anymore. So my point is, this thing we have right now, it's a sustenance of a group of people to maintain the status quo. But the truth is, resources are there. And the fourth industrial revolution, let's be real about it, is going to be a very interesting revolution because it doesn't need people. Remember those words. It doesn't need people.
I mean, with every revolution, there was always the fear of, people are not going to get jobs. Jobs are going to be taken away from people. And what are they going to do, right? And the same was the case with Industrial Revolution. But then we also saw the number of jobs that it created and how it freed individuals to doing more creative work, right? But let's move a bit from that. How would Africa have been if it wasn't for colonization, right? In terms of religion too, right? Because would we still be following our African traditions and African spirituality, right? Because, in a way, if, for example, like Africans were not colonized by the West, for example, we are colonized by the Chinese, right? Would we be monks right now, right? And what would that look like for us? So what do you think Africa would have been, if it wasn't for colonization and all the religions that were brought with that?
I think it's a very interesting speculative question. It's speculative, so we can't really guess because obviously we don't have that reality. But one thing I like about it is, if Africa had been allowed to go in the trajectory it was supposed to go in, where would it be? To answer that question well, we got to go back into history. And we have to challenge the question by posing this one. Or challenge the narrative, by posing this question. Is what you and I learn about the history of Africa true? And so I'm gonna go back to you on that one, Renatus. I want feedback from you because that is the basis on which we can now tackle this question you've asked. Ask yourself this question: is the history you and I have learned about Africa that is being taught in schools right now as we speak, my brother, is that the true history of Africa? What do you think?
Well, I don't think Africa, well, at least now we are trying, but before, I don't think Africa took control of its own stories, right? So in a way, it's very hard to say if the stories that we are being taught are true or not, but one could easily create an argument that it's not. And why is that? Well, nobody has ever wanted what's good for Africa except for Africa itself.
I like that, Renatus. It's true. Look, I'll be very honest with you. Thank God for technology. Thank God for the internet. Because one of the things the internet has done, which for me is a huge plus, it's a double-edged sword. So there's a good side and a bad side. But here's the good side. The good side of the internet is it has allowed never before accessible information to become public domain. So now, even stuff that was the preserve of experts and leaders in specific fields, I call them gatekeepers, by the way. These experts held on to knowledge which was not made available. But now, because of the internet, we have access to this information. I'm going to give one area, very controversial, very, very controversial. But for me, it hits home. Egyptology. Egyptology. Now, there has been so many different civilizations across the world. The Incas, the Aztecs, the Mayans. The Far East has got some amazing history and narrations, but the most exciting narrations and histories lie in the Middle East. So you're talking about the Mesopotamian Peninsula, where you had Babylon in the past and all those places. You've got Egypt. These are the two most ancient civilizations in the world. The Egyptian Kemet civilization and the Mesopotamian Babylonian civilization. Well, if you want to throw in, you can also bring the Sanskrit, which are the Indian subcontinent, because you had also ancient history there. Like really ancient, like really going back 3,500 years before Christ, 4,500 years before Christ. They have these early recordings. Now, let's come back to Egypt. Egyptology, what's that? Out of all these, the only field which got its own label was Egyptology. And the most powerful archaeologists and anthropologists and experts all descended into Egypt to study everything about Egypt and formed a branch called Egyptology, as we say. And you ask yourself this question: if Egyptology is so powerful, and if the knowledge of Egypt is so profound, why haven't we been taught that as part of our African history from our primary and secondary levels of school? Even now, here in Zambia, I can tell you, unless they change the syllabus without my knowledge, we don't learn about Egypt. We've never learned about Egypt. The pyramids, that's supposed to be Africa. We've never learned about it. And then you now move to the west of Africa. And then you move to the northern part of Africa, Morocco, Algeria, the Tuaregs, the Moors. And you start to learn that these people actually took civilization into Europe. So it was the Moors, Africans, from 500 AD, from about 400 AD, yes, 400 AD, just after, the church became the church. From that period up to about 700 AD, it was the Moors. They transformed Europe. Europe were basically barbarians. The only ones who were civilized were the Greeks. And what's so interesting is that Greeks pillaged so much information out of Alexandria. Alexandria was the center of learning. They had the most advanced libraries 500 years before Christ. That was the center of civilization. That was all destroyed during the Roman invasions of the 1st century AD. Now, again, Renatus, ask yourself, why? Who occupied all those places? What did they look like? Who were they? When the Islamic Ottoman Empire expansion began around 600 AD, under the charge of Muhammad and the Islamic expansion into Europe, you find again, very interestingly, that there is so much Africanness involved. If we also look at the migration of customs and behaviors through the Nile Valley before Christ, you see another very interesting development. You see Middle Eastern, Canaan, Israelite, Abrahamic customs spread into parts of Africa. There are enough scholars right now. The school is growing very big. The number of scholars is large. The body is amazing. And they are now just fighting with gatekeepers. But there is enough evidence now to suggest, Renatus, that many of our ancient African migrations actually came from that part of the world. They came from the Nile Valley and the so-called Middle East Peninsula. So what am I saying in short, Renatus? There's a terminology a number of experts came up with in the 20th century, Black experts, these professors and what, termed arrested development. And if you go deeper into that and study it, what you discover is that somewhere between 700 AD to 1400 AD, there began a deliberate drive to expunge history of the influence of the Africans. And by 1400, it actually became a bull. Now, the word bull here, I mean, is papal bull. For those who don't understand that, a papal bull is a declaration that is made by the Pope, which becomes law and is enforced with the backing of church and state. So in the 1400s, a papal bull was issued in which a deliberate drive to change everything to suit the narrative of the time was done. And so essentially from the 1400s into the 1500s, this is where we see the birth of slavery as a trade. Because some people are going to say, yeah, but there was slavery. No, the slavery that existed in the time of Jesus is incomparable to the transatlantic and trans-Arabic slave trade. This was an industry, Renatus. You get the difference, huh? Because in the past, yes, there were slaves and the like, but it wasn't an industry.
And people...
Yes, go on.
And people would also argue that there was also the same thing going on across Africa, right? But I think the extent to which the slave trade was conducted is incomparable to what was going on.
Yes.
Because you had individuals like, criminals of war, right? Yes. But the extent that slave trade took it was exceptional, was mind-blowing. And it was
another level.
It was such a well-organized, structured, and catered system.
And you see what it did, my brother Renatus? This is what we must not forget. As you captured people and took them to their new places, what did you do? The first thing you broke was their identity. That's why one of the ways they did that so well is religion. This is why I keep coming back to religion, because religion was seen as the tool to break the identity of people. So one, get them to believe in this God. Two, get them to get rid of everything connected to their culture because it's demonic. This is true whether it's Islam or Christian. And thirdly, make sure they change their names. Now, a lot of people have not understood the significance of a name change. You see, name change is profound because when you change the name of a person, you are literally dealing with their identity. That's why naming is such a big cultural issue in any culture. Jesus, before he was even born, the angel gave instructions, said, his name shall be called Jesus. It wasn't like they even had a choice in the name. They were already told this will be his name. And you check every part in the Bible, even some of the most powerful transformations that took place in scripture, you see these people change their names, like Saul became Paul. He said, because now I'm completely a different person. When you come into a place, Renatus, and you get people to change their names, you have messed with their identity in the most profound and powerful way imaginable. But right next to the changing of their name, what do? You change their culture. So you say, all these records are demonic, they are evil. Now, I'm not disputing that there wasn't demonic worship or idol worship. I don't dispute that. But the fact that it was a wholesale, you get my point, wholesale erasure of the history of a people. There's a saying, and I think it's Marcus Garvey who said this: a people that do not know their history and their culture are like a tree without roots. Powerful. That tree cannot grow. That tree cannot stand. That tree cannot produce fruit. And that's exactly what took place between essentially the 1400, no. Where am I again? Yeah, 1400 AD. You know, Jerusalem had already been captured by the Muslims, and now there was all that, the fall of Jerusalem, I think 1150 or 12 something, I've forgotten, the Knights Templars. There was big wars going on in Europe over this whole religious thing. And at that time, and a decree, powerful decree is made. We must conquer and completely obliterate the histories of these people. And I don't want to go into certain spaces. They are too controversial even for your show. So I will not go into those spaces, but take it from me. They have begun a deliberate...
No, go for them.
No, Renatus, this one is dangerous space, so we'll leave it at that. In case this video goes viral, let's not be quoted on some issues. But here's the point. There was a deliberate, systematic erasure of our identity as Africans, and it was a profound one. You remember, as they captured all the young, able-bodied men and women and took them across the continents into America and into the Arabian and Asian subcontinent, they were erasing so many things. They were taking away manpower. They were taking away ability. They were taking away talent. They were taking away culture. They were taking away all these things. And so we get to the 17, 18, 1900s, and people have forgotten who they are. I always say this. I use these words very carefully. Our people were dismembered. We were dismembered of our true root. Remember, I said something very interesting. I said evidence from African historians who are not subscribed to the system that blocks people from speaking truth have seen so much evidence to show that a lot of our African migration in sub-Saharan Africa is rooted in the Middle East. It's rooted in the Middle East through the Nile Valley. So what am I saying? The Nubian subcontinent, where you have Sudan today, where you have Somalia today, that's the route. Right up into Kemet, which is Egypt, and then into Canaan, where you have Abraham. And remember, Abraham was originally what? What was Abraham originally? Mesopotamian. He was Chaldean. He came from Iraq. So who were occupying all this area? I won't say much. Just know that it's a very interesting history with some deep rabbit holes when you go into it. It's that had to be erased. So by the time you get into the 1800s, Africans don't know their roots. But those who study anthropology have come and studied different African cultures. We've got some amazing professors and academicians who've done deep study of the ethnicity of Africans. And it's amazing, Renatus, to see that their ties, their roots, there are similarities in language, in phonetics, in cultural behavior with the Middle East. And how is that possible? Because we are supposed to have come from here. Where do you find this connection back to the Abrahamic way of things? So I'm telling you, the question you asked, if Europe had not interfered, I believe we would have been miles ahead of the Europeans. The truth is that there was a deliberate expunging of history to get Africans to forget. So I always use the word dismembered. So we were dismembered. So the key here is, as I said, Renatus, Africans need to remember. Note that word, remember. So bring back the parts that were dispersed during this deliberate drive to get us to lose our sense of identity. And they did a phenomenal job. To this day, Africans are so messed up when it comes to our identity. We really do not know who we are. And there's a lot of revelation, there's a lot of information coming out, which is quite scary. And because of that, the gatekeepers are tightening. You know, the gatekeepers who basically run every one of these fields use a lot of intimidation and fear, and the fear of what I call academic estrangement. Because experts are finding this information, Renatus. They are discovering strange things. They are learning truth which they never knew before about what's going on in Africa and in the Middle East. But this truth is too strange, and it's not going to suit the narrative that has been pushed all along. And so we as Africans are suffering that effect. But thankfully, there's a renaissance on the way. I'm one of the advocates of what I call the second renaissance. The reason I call it the second renaissance, Renatus, is because I know we had another one before. We are just not taught about it by history, but we had a renaissance. All civilization began in Africa. And remember, nothing separates the Middle East from Africa. It's just a canal that they built. But that part of the world was never separate. So the Middle East was part of Africa. But it is somebody who came and just marked the calendar, I mean the what you call it, the map, and said, this part is Middle East, this is not Africa, this part, that. But the truth is, that has always been part of Africa. Middle East has been part of Africa. This whole place was who we were. And that's why you see roots that trace back to that part of the world. So that's the very long answer to your question, if colonialism had not come. I really apologize for that long answer.
And something that we often do is that we usually speak about, you know, the effects of colonialism. We try and understand the history and what had happened, and, you know, what would have happened if it wasn't for colonization. But what should we be doing in this moment?
Very good question. I have what I call the 7 keys to transforming Africa. Now, a lot of my material is the philosophical side of that question. But there is a man who I hold in very high esteem called Professor Hannington Mubaiwa. He's the one who forwarded my book. So it's there, Professor Hannington Mubaiwa. This man wrote a technical manual called the Rapid Africa Plan. Absolutely powerful. I recommend everybody go out there and find that manual. It's very, very good. Now, mine is the, like I said, philosophical keys to changing the story. There are 7 of them. I'll try my best to run through them as quickly as possible. Number 1, we need to take responsibility. Everything that happens in lives of anybody are their responsibility. Whatever happens to you, except stuff which you can't control, like if an asteroid falls from the sky and bashes you, I mean, you can't control that. Or if war erupts in your area, you can't control that. But the truth of the matter is, collectively as a people, we are responsible for where we are. And so, Renatus, the first thing we must do is take responsibility for allowing ourselves to be here. And there's a whole explanation around that, but we must take responsibility. We can play victim, we can cry about colonialism and white supremacy and all these things, which are real challenges, I admit. But we are here because we allowed ourselves to be here. When Africa raised sons like Lumumba, when Africa raised sons like Sankara or Magufuli, or a whole host of others, Machel, when you start to study the history of Africa, you're going to discover that in every one of them, or every one of those was a cause. Every one of them was thwarted by someone else. So take responsibility. Number 2, we must raise our standards. We've lived so long in mediocrity that we feel this is okay, this is normal. Like you get to a point where you actually think normal, this mediocrity is normal. We need to get rid of that. We can't say, nah, you know, this is African. Like, I don't know how it is in your country, but here in Zambia, we even have something called Zambian time. Unacceptable, right? Zambian time? What's that? Time is time. If it's 2 o'clock, it's 2 o'clock. You can't say Zambian time and you show up at 3 o'clock. No, 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 no. So we need to raise our standards and get to the right level in every area of human endeavor. Number 3, we need to change our belief systems. For me, Renatus, this is the core. This is the crux. This is the heart. Our belief systems are the function of a programming. Religion is one of a number of tools. The other one is education. So religion, education, these two are the most powerful tools that have been used and continue to be used by the powers that be to ensure Africans remain dismembered. Yeah, that's the word. So if we want to remember and get back to the right place, we must first get rid of this belief system we hold on to right now. And now some people misunderstand me there. They'll think I'm talking about, no, we need to get rid of the white man's religion. It's never been a white man's religion. If you've listened to this full interview, you know what I just came from saying. I said some very serious things just earlier. So if you go back into that and check, you'll realize that, wait a minute, it's never been a white man's religion. The white man just appropriated it and used it to their advantage, taking advantage of the African. So we need to get rid of the belief system because they programmed a lot of booby traps and landmines in that religion, and now it has put us in a very bad place. And this is true both of Islam and Christianity. None of them are spared. We just don't have time to go into it. I don't specialize in Islam, but I can assure you with absolute confidence that Islam is just as much to blame as Christianity. So we get rid of the belief systems, get back to the true systems. Number 4, change our strategy. Renatus, we've now clocked 60 years of the OAU, which then became the AU in 2012. In those 60 years, what has the AU done to change Africa? What has the AU achieved to lift up the standard of this continent? I'm hard pressed. I'm telling you, I'm hard pressed to see the use of that organization. When the founders began it, they had some crazy ideas and we were going to go somewhere. But those ideas have not worked. Why? Because of a lot of factors. And so if for 60 years we've been a talking shop, I mean, imagine this is an organization that's supposed to be for Africans, by Africans, supporting Africa and helping Africa. And then we're receiving funding from Europe for Africa? Like, are we mad? Are we normal? What's wrong with our brains?
Well, he who feeds you controls you.
Thank you. The other saying is, he that pays the piper calls the tune. So they're going to tell you, no, this money we're giving you, you must make sure you do this. This money, you must make sure you do that. This money, you must. Right now, for example, in my country, these elephants are about to overrun the whole country. There are so many elephants. We used to kill those elephants and get the tusks and use them for decorations. Now they've outlawed that. So what are you going to do with all those elephants? And then somebody comes and tells me, no, there's too much humans. We need to allow the animals to also have their habitat. I won't say anything on that. But my point is this. We are being duped. And it is time we changed our strategy, because whatever we're doing now is not working. It's not helping the Africans. We're still in the same crap we're in before. And now the Chinese are about to take us over. And I know some people will say, no, but the Chinese have never been imperialists. They have an agenda. Everybody who comes on this continent has an agenda. They just change the methods, but the principle, the idea is the same. And if we go to sleep, in the next 100 years, we'll have a new demographic called the Chinese Africans. And it means we'll be speaking Mandarin and whatever it is. So for me, I think we really need to just wake up and smell the coffee. So change the strategy, number 4. Number 5, strengthen institutions. In any country where strong institutions exist, equity exists, justice exists, well-being of the people exists, because the institutions look out for the smallest person in the equation. Unfortunately, Africa had arrested development in so many areas. You know, we are more of a monarchy type of people. We are more of that kingdom chief type of arrest. That's the kind of thing Africans are more familiar with. Then they bring us this strange concept called democracy, which I suppose is a very good concept. But I mean, I can't argue against it. I agree, it's a great concept. But the problem is you bring in a concept, but you don't deal with the people and their understanding and their belief systems, which has always been kingdom. That's why in Africa, presidents are treated like kings. Why? Because that's our thinking. Here in Africa, a president is a king. And that's why many of them stay forever and ever, because they're given that kind of treatment and they get drunk with it. We are not used to this democracy. So we need something else that's going to kind of fit the mold well. A kind of a hybrid between the chiefdom, kingdom system and the governance, good governance system. Find a way. The irony, Renatus, is in the past, before these guys came and imposed it, we already had a system and it worked perfectly. It worked perfectly. We had a way in which we could manage. These chiefdoms had institutions and everybody followed what the institution said. You know that. So we had local courts, we had the council of elders, advisors, village community heads. Well, there was already a system in there. But what they did is they came, imposed their system, then got rid of our culture by obliterating it. And then now they bring strange concepts, and then they realize, they know that the people are still stuck on the feudal village type of ruling and thinking. And that's why we have this problem, Renatus. We haven't evolved into democracy in the truest sense of the word. Some countries in Africa are trying, like Zambia, but it's still very faulty. You can't compare our Zambian democracy, for instance, to European democracy. And I mean European as in Western Europe. Eastern Europe is another story. So we're still struggling with that. So strong institutions. Number 6, poor governance. We need to lift our governance. We need to start ruling Africa on good governance principles. I don't want to go into preaching about that. You know what those are, inclusiveness, equity, fairness, whatever. The principles that make good governance. And the irony is that in our past, our African institutions had very strong good governance principles. Even chiefs couldn't just wake up and make decisions. They had to consult what we call indunas, what they call elders in the community. And those elders sat and discussed issues to come up with a decision that was fair for everyone. That's how we ran in the past. But they, of course, imposed and messed it up. And so now we're struggling because they for me, I call it a booby trap. They literally booby trapped or did a systemic anomaly on Africans to make sure the system failed within itself so that they could continue controlling Africans. And a classic example where we're seeing that degeneration now, before it wasn't, but it's coming, is South Africa. South Africa is degenerating before our eyes. It's so depressing to see. Because they had strong institutions, they had very good governance principles. But somewhere along the way, they discarded this because they began to bring in the anomalies. I again, don't want to blame. We must take responsibility. But I feel very strongly that that was deliberately planted so that one day, in typical Hegelian dialectic, somebody will get up and say, you know what? We're better off when these whites were ruling us. Mark my words. Mark my words. The party that was kicked out 28 years ago is going to come back. And that will be a travesty. So that's number 6. And finally, number 7, good leadership principles. We know what good leadership is. And we need to employ that to the best of our ability. A lot of our African positional leaders need to understand this. Leaders lead by influence, not position. So we have a lot of positional leaders in Africa, and a lot of them who were influential get into positions and then become drunk with the positions, which is still unfortunate. So we need leaders that understand truly what great leadership entails. And if we can see these 7 things in place, Renatus, we will see the change.
We need leaders, not politicians.
What we have is politicians. And the saddest part, Renatus, is the politicians never did anything that they talk about. For example, We have a politician, but they've never been a businessman. So you tell me how he's going to take care of the business people. You have a politician, they've never been teachers. How will they understand the problems of teachers? You have politicians, they've never been economists. How will they understand the economic challenges of their... In short, we have politicians who are just career politicians. They have no background that makes them relevant to the challenges that are facing their nations. This is one of our greatest setbacks in Africa.
Yeah, I mean, and I hope that we're able to create institutions that really develop leaders that we had in the 1950s, in the 1960s, the Kwame Nkrumah, the Patrice Lumumba, the Julius Nyerere, the Thomas Sankaras, the Gaddafi. Like it's like that. Mention them, they're known. We know them, right? And you know what they did. Like we know why they cared. We know that they cared for their people, right? Like their people came first, even before their own welfare, right? That I mean. And I really hope that right now the work that is being done will really develop a generation of leaders who genuinely care about the continent, and they're not just puppets, right? And who are just there for the sake of being the face of leadership, but they're not really the ones in charge, and they don't even care about the welfare of the people. Well, thank you so much. I mean, this was such... I mean, an enlightening conversation, right? I mean, I thought it was just going to be based on religion, but then we had to even explore colonialism and the origins of the African people and what had changed, and, the deliberate efforts that were put in to hide the African story, the African history, the African achievements. Just a powerful episode in general. And thank you so much for joining me. And I mean, I love the work that you're doing, and I hope that you're able to do more of it, and more people are able to hear your story and hear what you're doing, because you're doing a very important work, which is basically aiming at uplifting an average African.
Indeed. Thank you so much, Renatus. It's always a pleasure. And anything to do with Africa, I mean, Africa is in my heart because I'm such a voracious student of history. And the irony, like I said earlier on, when you start to learn the true history of Africa, not this watered down, dismembered history, when you get to learn the true history, you'll be blown away. We were once a glorious people. And I'm of the view that's coming back. That's why we call it the second Renaissance. It's this Africa's second Renaissance. It's gonna come, and it will come on the shoulders of this new generation that are coming up and saying, why? They are questioning the status quo. Why? And all you need in any revolution is the numbers. Now, the truth of the matter is 90% will be asleep throughout. That's never gonna change. 4% are gonna promote the agenda of the 1%. The 5% are those of us who are trying to awaken the 90%. But here's the encouraging part. All you need to do is awaken 3% of that 90 to achieve critical mass. And the 90 and the 87% or whatever will follow. So our job, you and I, Renatus, and anybody else listening to this, is to awaken the 3%. Find the 3%. Go out there and preach the message and find the 3%. They will come.
Nasser Damian Male say, Africa must wake up, the sleeping sons of Jacob, for what tomorrow may be. May a better day come. Yesterday we were kings, but can you tell me, young ones, who are we today? Yeah. Where can people find your book?
My book is available on Amazon. So there are two ways. You can go straight to the website itself, 5 Major Reasons Africa is Poor. Just type that out, but use the number 5, not the digit. 5, not the word 5. So you go 5 Major Reasons Africa is Poor.com. Search for Rev. Walter Mwambazi. You should see all this stuff just pop up on Google. It's also available on Amazon as a paperback, as a hardback, and as an audiobook. So it's fully available and can be accessed immediately. So that's where you find it. 5 Major Reasons Africa is Poor, or just type Rev. Walter Mwambazi on Google, and it'll give you all my links on Facebook and LinkedIn and Twitter and that kind of thing.
Thank you so much.